So, psychoanalysis, politics, and the social bond. Sounds a bit bizarre, but from very early on, Freud's texts become very political, and that will not disappear until his death. The first political text, I think, is Group Psychology and the Ego, obviously. But something caught my attention. It was a case brought by Owen concerning a chap who'd been quite close to Lacan. I will go through that, and a text in relation to that from another chap called Danny Nobus, who was surprised that such a chap, the chap I'm going to talk about here, the Yerodia, could be so close to psychoanalysis. And something caught my attention in relation to this case is the word I've written there, vermin. Vermin. Because there's another chap who used that word, the Austrian corporal, and not just towards the Jews, but also the Slavs. Okay, vermin is a word he used. I've been looking a lot into the Hitler case, and when you have the strong presence of an animal in a case such as vermins, then you can be certain you're in the domain of totem and taboo, which means you are in the domain of a father, and therefore superego, morality, and all that. So by qualifying somebody of a vermin, basically you remove their humanity. Obviously, they've become an animal, so killing them is no problem, right? And that shows us why Antigone has been so insistent for her brother to be buried. Only humans bury their dead, so that he's not treated like a dog. And that's what she says. Yeah. And all that is also in relation to a saying in Seminar 7 in the last session: faire les choses au nom du bien, et plus encore au nom du bien de l'autre, voilà qui est bien loin de nous mettre à l'abri, non seulement de la culpabilité, mais de toutes sortes de catastrophes intérieures. Wanting to do the good in the name of good itself, and wanting most especially to do the good of the other, will not protect you from guilt, but it will not protect you either from all kind of internal disasters. Seminar 7, last session. Okay. And I'm going to give two examples of how to act in politics from a psychoanalytical background. So the first one is this chap called Yerodia. So we've got this chap who's been traveling from what was known as the Belgian Congo to Paris, got his doctorate in philosophy, and had an affair, or married Gloria, who was the secretary of Lacan, and they both became part of the first circle around Lacan. Yerodia was driving Lacan forth and back to the seminars, booking the rooms, looking after Lacan's affairs, all together with Gloria. Okay. And there is something interesting. He traveled from the Belgian Congo to Paris. That's in the 60s. In those days, you have no EasyJet. It's a very expensive ticket. You have the line is run by Swissair. Okay, and I've used.
Sorry.
I've used that line myself as a child. I've done several forth and back. So Yerodia is not some poor African chap. He comes from money, and that's an important point, as we'll see later. So he worked at UNESCO, which is a cultural organization. So that means he didn't come again from impoverished background, yeah, but from money. So then Judith and Alain Miller came back to Lacan, and they all became very, very, very tight. Right. So later on, after Lacan's death, he goes back to the Congo and he gets involved in the Kabila government. That's after Mobutu was driven out of power, and he became foreign secretary. So again, we don't have somebody ordinary. And he has bee in his bonnet about the Tutsi and the Hutu. And that's already an artificial division anyway. There's nothing which will distinguish a Tutsi from a Hutu, from Rwanda. And that's where the word vermin comes into play, because he called them vermin. And I have a quick interview of him, and this is the transcription in English.
Pour nous, ce sont des déchets, et c'est même des microbes qu'il faut qu'on éradique avec méthode, avec résolution, et le temps que vous voulez que je chiffre dépend de la résistance des microbes, mais pour ce qui nous concerne, nous sommes décidés à utiliser la médication la plus efficace.
He said that,
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
Déchet rejects outside of humanity, right?
Who does he refer to here?
The Tutsis and the Hutus. Okay, there was an alliance at some point between the Hutus and some of the Belgian Congolese politicians, and he was with Kabila trying to drive out those politicians. Yeah, so this is not invented. He actually thinks that, right? And there's another speech which he made at the UN, which is 20 minutes long. And again, you have the same thematic, which is that the other is a grabbing other with his dirty paws. So the other is perceived as persecutory other. And there's here a similarity with the Hans case. We have an enigmatic jouissance, which cannot be resolved. So it's projected onto an other, onto an animal, in that case, In the case of Yerodia, it's projected onto the Hutu and the Tutsis, right? So, and we have Nobus in his paper who asked himself, well, how can such a chap be involved with Lacan, be involved with psychoanalysis? And that's a completely wrong question, because Nobus forgets that the drive is fundamentally aggressive. Fundamentally, at first, we are nasty people. Those of you who have children, you know how much of an effort it is to actually get your children to respect others and not to grab things for themselves. It's in that sense that we are nasty people, fundamentally aggressive. Okay. And he also forgets that the drive cannot be entirely symbolized. There's always a remnant which comes back onto you or onto society, which dissolves things. So it's a constant struggle we have to perform in order to keep things together. Okay. And it seems that Nobus also critiques what he thinks as being the ideal of psychoanalytical societies. How could somebody like this, he says, have been involved with Lacan? Well, if you have an ideal, yes, you can ask those kind of questions, but precisely what characterizes, if something characterizes psychoanalytical societies, psychoanalytical groups, is that they don't have an ideal. They function in an entirely different way. So, with Nobus, it seems to be about the jouissance of difference, the jouissance of a world without others. That's what his paper is. That is the direction his paper is moving towards.
Jouissance of difference, jouissance of
a world without others.
Ah, see, a world without others. Yes.
Everybody is nice. And that's it. And everything is solved, And that would be the ideal of psychoanalytical societies. And one last thing about this Yerodia chap, in another interview, he questions the United Nations Charter and the Declaration of Human Rights. And he presents himself as the true guarantor of peace within a national spirit of good faith. So he's even more powerful than the All One Father. So he sets himself as the one, which is always a very dangerous position, not only for him, but also for the people. He tries to put that on him. So that's my take on this Yerodia business and psychoanalysis in politics. Now, here is another story of how I was involved in acting, trying to act. 2 years ago, I joined a political party, and I became chair of my local branch. And at the time of the Grenfell affair, membership was saying, oh, let's do something. They're going to be moved to that building nearby. Let's go there, let's wave some banners, and let's put some flowers in the flats where they're going to be rehoused, blah, blah, blah. My alarm bells rang. And I say, hold on. Because again, my alarm bells rang. That's not how you're going to deal with people who've just been through a huge discontinuity in their lives. So I made a few inquiries and I came across their lawyers. Got in touch with them and asked, well, this is what the membership wants to do. What do you think? And they said, back off. Quite rightly as well. And one of the lawyers had been before a therapist. And I used the word jouissance and he perfectly understood what it was about. Because what was about to happen was we were going to have a master's discourse where the membership were going to stuff with their jouissance the people from Grenfell. Do they want to be saved? Do they want to be saved by you? Do they want to be saved by you in the way you propose? Have you thought about that, sir? So I communicated that to the executive of my party. They took that in advisement and they acted on it and they said, yes, we're going to back off. Let's wait. Okay. So that's one way of intervening into politics, having a psychoanalytical background. Yeah? You don't rush on your white horse to go and save people. That's an ideal, and it doesn't work, it's bound to fail. It's bound to be catastrophic, actually. So, as a conclusion, when we have a laxist education as a child who is raised without any kind of limits, you can do anything you want. Yeah. We'll let our child decide about his sex later on. We'll let him decide if he's a boy or a girl, and he can wear whatever clothes he wants, blah, blah, blah. Well, you can be sure that's going to give an adult who will then try to create some kind of flow, but that by necessity it will be the ferocious superego, the bad superego, who will take over. Okay. So if you're in front of a very moralistic person, you can be sure that's somebody who was raised without limits. The only thing you can feel guilty about, and that brings in the whole thing of guilt, which you touched upon, actually. And the only thing you can be guilty about is to have compromise on your desire. That's in Seminar 7, the last session. Do not compromise on your desire. Yeah. And what can we do with politics? It's about preserving a name of a father with which you can actually do things. Savoir y faire. Okay. And Martin Luther King had a dream. He didn't have an ideal. I have a dream. He never said I have an ideal. Yeah? Okay. And again, to do good, that's to stuff others with your own jouissance. In the case of Yehuda, this African chap from the Belgian Congo, he, I think, was doing a sacrifice to obscure gods. Yeah, that's Seminar 11. In other words, he was trying to make the other, the big other with a uppercase O, appear, to give him consistency, when in fact, as demonstrated by Merleau-Ponty, the other has to be invisible, has to remain invisible. Yeah. When you try to give consistency to the other, then you have you fall into the domain of an imaginary debt, which is very different from a symbolic debt, and this is where we connect with totem and taboo. Symbolic debt can be transmitted, and that's what keeps you together. It's the guilt of having killed the father, and it's a mythical story, of course, but it's that guilt which actually binds them together, yeah, the sons, through the communal meal. Whereas with an imaginary debt, because you can't pay it, you can never repay it fully, you get into that kind of crazy behavior. So before the murder of the father, it's not okay. And after the murder of the father, it's not okay still, but you can symbolize that it's not okay. Yeah. And that's a very important thing. And then you can teach the other generations how to symbolize that it's not okay. And that's what creates the social bond. So guilt is in fact a structure. It's always there. There is an immanent guilt. It has nothing to do with you personally. It's not because you caused a lot of pain to your mom or you did not behave correctly as a kid and so on. It's always already there. And it is the symbolization of that guilt which actually can create the social bond. So the master discourse, such as politics, always functions with ideals. And what I think I tried to do in the Grandfall story was not to function with an ideal, but to function on a one-by-one basis. I had this case of membership wanted to invade the Grandfall people, and I put in place the third of the law, their lawyers. So it was no longer me and the membership, but me, the membership, and the lawyers. Yeah. And if anything characterizes the analytical discourse, it's to try to find a morality in acts, but which precisely is not an ideal, whereas Nobus was trying to find an ideal somewhere in order to say that Hiroda had failed that particular ideal. Yeah. And Lacan proposes to approach the father, but not as a mythic father who guarantees that one can take pleasure from all, but as a father who guarantees that pleasure can be taken from one, outside of any universal. Yeah. And if you fail to do that as a father, then watch out for dysfunction, body dysfunction, basically. And it's always a case by case basis. So beware of do-gooders, what Lacan used to call the balsam, the beautiful souls, those who want to do good, yeah. Because their only interest is actually to berate and badger those who do bad. So you have an enjoyment of pointing the finger, saying bad, 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 yeah. But the thing is that it's not evil which makes you feel guilty, it's actually your relationship to the good, the sovereign good. And again, Seminar 7. And what is your sovereign good? Das Ding. Voilà. Lacan said, when you have a holy mother in place, you can be sure you're going to have a pervert son. It's going to produce a pervert son. Yeah. So that's a connection. There's a connection there as well with the Harry Weinstein affair. Yeah.
Oh, but yeah.
He can't go beyond his ideal mother, whether it's a real one or imaginary. Yeah. He can't go beyond there, and
There's
treat-
no substitution in place.
yeah, his treatment of women is compulsive. He must. It's a compulsion. Okay, so him going to therapy, not much hope. It's not in that direction. Yes, he's still in for the ideal mother, and he's trying to go beyond, but he's a whole every time. Yeah. And that's a connection also with our American Virgin, if you remember.
Oh, the American Virgin
Yeah, who-
killer. Yeah.
He couldn't get. He was son of a wealthy Hollywood producer. He couldn't get girls to find an interest in him. What does he do? Boom! And then he kills himself.
Place.
It's a phantasmatic capture. We get captured by the fantasy. Yeah. And it's not even their own fantasy. So you have guilt first. That's, I would say, is the fundamental structure. Then that guilt is transposed onto the mother's body. Yeah. That's when you start having a metonymic process. And then from the mother's body, you go onto other women or onto other men, depending on your identifications. Yeah. But you need that separation from the... it's the absolute good which is lethal. It's not evil which is lethal. Yeah? The absolute good as represented either by as Ding or the mother's body.
Yeah, it's because you made the connection, a nice connection between guilt and the ideal.
Yeah.
Because guilt, they go together for me. Where there's guilt, there's this veneration and some kind of ideal.
Absolutely.
Either in its place or as guilty because you haven't been able to accede to the ideal.
Anybody else involved into politics and who has encountered these issues of ideals?
One thing I would say is that Malcolm X would not say that Martin Luther King did not have an ideal. He would definitely say that Luther King had an ideal.
I had a dream.
Yeah.
He had a dream.
Yeah. But there's still an ideal there, I think.
The dream was, he was able to transform his dream, to push his dream into legislation with the help of the Kennedy brothers. So it never stayed at the stage of ideal. Yeah. So he was able to produce an act. There was a before and an after. That's the meaning of the psychological act. Yeah, you create a difference before and after.